So, welcome to this new series on the other side of psychoactive plant medicines. And today I am welcoming Georgie to the conversation. Hello there.
Thank you, Jess. Thank you for having me.
Yes, pleasure. I'm really, yeah, happy to have you here. Obviously, this is the topic that I feel like we've kind of gone through together. So, yeah,
Mm,
it's really great. And also, obviously, we had the previous conversation on the new monks as well when
yeah,
you were going through a major shift. So,
true. I'm happy it was time to refine certain perceptions and like the way I understand plant medicines now and like that space that I used to be compared to this space now it feels like much more grounded and like I was in the midst of it then and there. So now it's going to be an interesting conversation to have for sure.
yeah, I love that. And yeah, I feel like yeah, it would be really interesting to see now from, even though that was the mainly about your journey and this one is focusing on the plant medicines, but yeah, it would be definitely interesting to share a bit more about your transformation throughout the whole process.
Yeah, it would be interesting for me to actually hearing myself talking
Mm,
because there's always aspects that of course I'm
mm.
integrating within my own space. There's always aspects and nuances that are coming through when I'm having conversations with people like you, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious to see.
Mm. Yeah, man. And it's just these past few years have been major breakthroughs and changes and transformations, I
Mhm.
find. But yeah, so this is the episode 3 now, and yeah, I really enjoyed the other episodes actually, and it's really I feel like everyone has quite a unique perspective to
Yeah.
bring to the table. So yeah, do you want to share maybe how you got onto the path of exploring with plant medicine,
Yeah, I remember.
the beginning?
Yeah, at the beginning, it must have been 2018, and I had the this idea of ayahuasca in my reality in my field for a while. And I remember watching documentaries and I remember studying about it and reading and not necessarily having the opportunity to speak directly with people that did it already or tried it already. So my only point of contact was through documentaries. And I remember that in most of them it was this picture that's being painted of this being very miraculous and like this plant medicine that is doing absolutely incredible things. And I remember seeing a lady that was sharing her own experience going with being having cancer and coming back healed. And at that point in time, I was thinking, oh, wow, this must be amazing. And of course, other people were talking about the bad experiences with it, the other side of the miraculous aspects, which is psychosis or all sorts of dysregulation in their system, like maybe their nervous system or having a certain fear. Like some people, they go and they heal from a certain phobia, and other people get a certain fear after the experience. So I was a little bit ambivalent, but at some point I had a combo experience, which it was quite supportive for me at that point. It did help, and it did kind of open up perception in terms of like what the body can do to be supported to clear and kind of move through energetic debris quicker and effectively. So I jumped through that experience. I had the courage to move into ayahuasca experience, and I had my first experience, which was very beautiful overall. Like I had like an absolutely amazing experience, and I was just fascinated. And of course, I had the moments of purge and the moments of what's going on. Like my consciousness was stretching and time was dissolving and um changing everything. Like my perception was changing, and I of course I was seeing the different colors and fractals and many other things that they are kind of common in these experiences. And it was a feeling of freedom, a feeling of liberation, and it was a feeling of love that I experienced within myself. It was just almost like I had the experience that the love was available only if I wanted to choose it. So it was basically my choice if I would tap into that field of love, and if I would have the power or the awareness or the courage to see that actually that love was inside of me. It was not coming from the plant or something exterior or whatever. And for that experience, for me was kind of I don't know how to call it, because it's really tricky to give it a word to it. But it was in such a way that inspired me almost with an absolute belief that I should be working with the plant. And I noticed that throughout my experience with co-facilitating that space, I never served it, but I was always in the environment, like helping certain facilitators and being in that space of co-facilitation, including doing a shadow healing course that it was about learning about the emotional aspect of our being, energetic hygiene, and working with the shadow, our younger parts and stuff like that. But it was intertwined and weaved with working with the plant as a support mechanism, as a support system. And I noticed in that period of time that a lot of people would come to these spaces and would have this expansive experiences. And it's almost like there was this like very short, temporary, very high expansion of consciousness, but that would have been enough for them to kind of made them hook onto this plant and this experience and having this desire to come back. And I've seen it many times in which people went a little bit into messianic complex, like the god complex, because of course in that experience there is an expansion and a sensitivity of senses and like a heightened awareness. But at the same time, there are a lot of other very, very tricky aspects of this environments that not a lot of people talk about. And they kind of
Yeah.
get distracted by the colors and the hallucinations and the this multi-sensorial perception, and also the amount of love that is in that space and this sense of community and this sense of belonging. Yeah, but that is actually not that is not um what heals. That is just like a doorway. That is just an entry point that is
Oof.
showing somebody that maybe
Mm.
was very contracted, maybe had like a lot of coping mechanisms from childhood, maybe like an overly stimulated nervous system. Um, we're like groomed in society to kind of like disconnect from nature, disconnect from our bodies, not being able to listen. Like, what is my body needing right now? Do I want to? Does my body want to drink, or I just heard at the radio that I should be drinking 2 liters of water, and I take that as an absolute reality, or like I heard that so and so supplement is good for me, so now I'm going to go rushing to whatever health shop and I'm going to get the supplement without actually asking my body, like, do you want this? do you need this? So I noticed in time that in that
Mm.
space, in those circles, there are elements, yeah, the space itself, not the medicine, not the plant,
Yes.
like the space itself will provide certain environments or energetic containers and energetic spaces that people were longing for. Yeah, the belonging, the community, the feeling of love, the feeling of maybe like more joy and like more ecstasy, more um the allowance of like self-expression that was present in those spaces was actually what I personally believe that is what actually was drawing people more than the plant itself. But they weren't able
Wow.
to see that. They were not able to see that all of these
Yeah.
aspects they can be in our day-to-day life if we are making the steps and taking the decisions to create that for ourselves.
Yeah. 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 That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, because actually I just had a friend had the experience for the first time, and that's actually quite aligned to what she said. She
Mm-hmm.
loved the community, the people, the love that she felt in the yeah,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it is
Because
indeed like
it's
sorry.
very well for someone who's like living in the city, and it can be very unique and very different to what one would experience day
Mm-hmm.
to day. You
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah. And from where I was in that part of my, you know, at that point in my evolution, in my awakening, in my um, returning to myself,
Mhm.
basically.
Yeah.
Even if I would read a lot and I would like be on all knowing Google, you know, and I was, oh, what is about this and about that and like energy and chakras and this and that and all that stuff, you know, different cultures and different philosophies and
Yeah.
traditions and you name it, you know, we like I've been like diving into so many aspects, but um in that space there I started to ask questions like why would people come back again and again and again, because
Mm.
my experience was very much different than the majority of people. Like some people would get scared by it because it was very intense and it would put them in a position in which they had to face like a lot of their shadows, or they said shadows, but those are basically like emotional, like experiences from the past, maybe childhood developmental traumas and whatever might have been like adaptations to this reality that they were obviously useful at that time and they helped us in many many ways to survive, but definitely they're not helping us thrive right now. So because they were faced with that reality, they were kind of like backing off big time. And I had cases of people going into psychosis or like talking like um, inexplicable things. And I've seen other energetic situations in which they definitely look like possessions, you know, like different voices and like different
Wow.
in a person body, you know, like a different voice coming out, and
Mm.
the inability to
Mm.
think and reason and like kind of like wanting to punch and defend and all these kind of things.
Mm.
And I started questioning, you know, why are these things happening, like
Yeah.
a lot of people would be absolutely depleted after one of these experiences, like very very tired and very sleepy and achy and stuff like that. And it's like, yeah, I understand that there's a lot of energy moving through, and like there's also energy being released, and also there's a lot of energy consumption because there might be movement, there might be um the hours or like the length of the experience, but at the same time like different things would not simply add up. And because I do have, I'm no expert in this, but I do have like a biology background, so I looked in my past to how cells work, how the brain works, how the neurotransmitters work. And at that time, I was also very closely working with a magnesium supplement. And later on, but I knew it intuitively at that point, judging by how the environment and like the space would flow, like all the purging, sweating, and the dietary restrictions before one of these ceremonies, like all of these things, I was able to piece them and like create this puzzle only now after maybe 2 or 3 years of like um, continuing the questioning and bringing pieces like the nervous system aspects and like the mineral depletion aspect. And I had to explain to myself what is that um, was not congruent in the spaces. And from here we can go on like a different avenues. But for example, I noticed that one of the things that was missing in those spaces is the power that was given to this plant that was taking away from the personal power. And that was probably one of the biggest revelations or epiphanies I had, because it was always this
Mm.
reverence to this plant that, oh, it's the medicine and it helps me and it
Yeah.
heals me. But actually what happens is taking away from what is actually healing. There's the healing is our own consciousness. That is the healing agent. And yes, the plant might offer a space of opening, but it comes
Mm.
with a lot of dangers and a lot of other aspects that are not actually very well known or discussed or considered.
Interesting.
As even in those spaces when
Yeah.
facilitator, especially the westernized, I
Yes.
haven't been in the jungle, so I don't know how they do it there. But I'm assuming with quite a conviction that the shamans, the
Yeah.
curanderos in the jungle, they don't invoke on all sorts of spirits. Whereas in the space of where I was like doing the ceremony, like
Yeah.
the facilitator will invoke like gods and goddesses and all sorts of beings like the devas and the devis and the angels and all sorts of stuff. So at some point for me that kind of like felt like an energetic soup. And knowing what I know now, it
Yes.
was very much like giving the power to an external force, giving the power to these beings that might look like they're more evolved, being like interdimensional beings. They are certainly more evolved, but this doesn't mean that they always come with good intentions. And there's something that a lot of people might not still be willing to look at, because if we are looking even at this reality, it's obvious to us that we're not in an organic flow. Like we're not thriving, we're not experiencing um, a level of communion and a level of interdependence that is supportive and sustainable for all of us. There's still a lot of division and a lot of separation and a lot of um, situations that they could not possibly exist when all
Mm.
aspects of creation would have been aligned to the true organic um, blueprint,
Yeah.
what is pure love and pure awareness. So
Mm.
it's obvious if we look at the world at large that there are parts of this reality which are not, from my perspective, aligned to what would be a unity consciousness.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So even if we're looking like as at basic principles, like as above, so below, or whatever other philosophies, like what is here, there's also elsewhere. It doesn't matter what worlds, what dimensions, there's always a field of energy or a field of like beings that should not be just invited in our space without questioning, like, who is that, who is that god, who is that demigod, who is that deva or devi or whoever, like, who is this angel, you know and even if these beings, let's assume they will always be there for our support, but then how are we actually going to learn to be in our power and in our integrity if we don't give us the opportunity to navigate this reality as much as possible using our own consciousness, our own innate intelligence, and our own innate ability, knowing that we are connected to that one source, that of like that field of intelligence that created everything. So I've seen this again and again in these spaces. Incongruences I started not to like at some point, why they're like being called all sorts of beings without actually questioning like who these beings are, where are they coming from, are they helping or are they not helping, and why is not this space created in a way that is actually linking myself as a participant, for example, with my own power, and says like, hey, let's go and journey into your body, let's go and journey into your own intelligence, let's go and journey into whatever is stored there, but let's give you the tools to navigate that, so you are able to move through this like densities or traumas or whatever. And people will come to these spaces, they will have like a big cry, like a big anger release or whatever, but if they want to have like a sustained practice after that, which is inner child work, regulating the nervous system, having a good mineral intake, having nourishing foods, and constantly driving it back home to the insides, to their core, um, it's not sustainable and it's not healing. It becomes a crutch, and it's a very very subtle and almost like in some cases is imperceptible transition, whereas this one or two off experiences, they're supposed to be opening the realm
Yeah.
of possibility, will become a crutch and will
Mm.
literally bring people in, creating this fantasies of like, yes, but I'm being guided and I'm seeing all of these things, and I have this urge to work with the plant, and I'm like, I have this drive to help people. And like I've seen this again and again, hundreds and like tens of people. I was having groups of like 30, 40, 60 people in one ceremony, and we were having these monthly.
Mm.
There were times, there were like people that I've seen, and I've seen also the recurring ones. And then I noticed like this desire, or like this calling to work with a plant. And I personally believe that that would come from a subtle or less subtle gut complex, which means the psyche will give so much importance to this experience, so much meaning, and it's almost like the psyche will fantasize about the possibilities, that will say, oh, but I'm God now, and now I can heal others, and now I can do energy work. Like there is this opening that happens, and of course there is this part of tapping into the personal power, but at the same time, there is this possibility that it could move into delusion. It could move into a space in which people are very drawn to and they don't even question it. And I've been there as well, because it was very empowering to start to express myself and to carry myself in a different ways, in more integrated ways, and have the ability to use my voice, and having the trust that I can actually, I do have some energetic awareness and like some energetic capacities to help myself and help others. But this doesn't mean that we are all supposed to be working with plants and like being in this medicine ceremonies forever, because we have
Wow.
these abilities regardless. And I've
Wow.
seen,
Yes. Yes.
yeah, yeah, and like those spaces can actually
Yes.
tint our abilities, and it become a distraction, because a lot of people would come in the circles and it's like, oh, I just want to heal my past life from Egypt, and I want to heal my past life from when I was a witch or whatever. But from a quantum perspective, that I guess most people that are awakening to more of a reality that is like seen with the bare eye, with the naked eye, we agree that time is simultaneous. Like it's all happening now. So in this new agey plant medicine circles, ayahuasca experiences or whatever, especially ayahuasca, because the other plants are slightly different. This doesn't mean that there are points of contact. What's happening is like, oh, they go for this hype, they go for like this um illusion that if they will be able to tap into whatever past life, they will be able to heal. But where's the power? The power is now, is in this moment. Like my consciousness and my awareness and my directed thought and energy can travel, yeah, through time, in the
Now.
past and in the future at the same time, from this present moment, from
Yes.
this body of mind right now.
Mm.
So it's a matter of choice. Am I choosing to be the driver of like the car,
Yeah.
the captain of the boat, or I'm going to be a victim of what happened in whatever so and so past life?
Yeah.
And like if we are seeing like how many people are actually caught into this illusion of past life, they're not even able to see that there's also a future
Mm.
existence, and there's a future aspect of that consciousness which is very much evolved, very much
Yeah.
already understood the mechanics of this reality. And actually nobody
Yeah.
is like very willing to tap into that.
Yes.
Everybody, like not everybody, but a lot of people, they go into, oh, I need to heal this past thing and da 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 da. But that is also a distraction, including the visuals in this plant medicines.
Mm.
Like the visuals are not actually healing, or they're not actually providing any source of wisdom. It is also a distraction,
Mm.
because the
Well,
consciousness is going to like, oh wow, this is so pretty and
yeah,
stuff
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
that, instead of like driving it again
Yeah.
back home into the body, what's happening.
Well, I guess it depends because I think sometimes the visuals are just like the pretty fractals, but sometimes it can be like people and situations and
Hmm.
circumstances and,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I'm talking mostly
yeah.
about like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
pretty
This
stuff that kind of
yes, yeah.
floats around and stuff like that,
But
which is nice to see. I
yeah,
used to,
yeah, yeah.
one ceremony, I remember I was sitting there, I was, wow,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
so beautiful. And then there was like another aspect of my conscience, like, Georgie, why you like, this is not the point.
This
This
is
is
not the
not the
point.
point.
Oh, we're gonna love that.
Like it's very much like how reality goes, and all these distractions, the distractions, no
Yeah, yeah,
matter
yeah.
how fluffy are and how
Yeah.
cute they are, they're not actually the point of the journey.
Mm,
There's so much more happening.
yeah. I mean, you said so much there. Like there were so many big points as
Yeah,
well. Firstly, you obviously were working in the circles for like 2 to 3 years, right?
2 years, yeah.
2 years, yeah. And it was quite frequently, like you said,
Mhm. Yeah, sometimes even twice or 3 times a week when we would have our
Wow.
course. Yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, you had quite an experience there.
yeah.
And then yeah, so there was something that Jason said on the first episode as well, which was similar to what you were saying about all the beings that were being called into the ceremony. And I find it really interesting because we were kind of saying, are other people asking the questions as well when
Mhm.
that happens? And I think I mean, I think in some places, like you said, you've only experienced it in the West. They, the shamans, I feel like they are also still doing that, because
Yeah, but I have a feeling they're asking for the spirits of the land. They're asking
protection, yeah.
they're
Gotcha, gotcha, gotcha.
it's slightly it's
Different.
very much different, yeah.
Okay, yeah, yeah, no, I see what you're saying. But, and then obviously there's the whole aspect of, like, black magic, because then some people come in purposely to mess things up, but
Yeah,
we've
yeah.
heard those stories. But yeah, Jason was basically saying that he noticed that they were calling all these beings in, and then he said he asked the same question, like, "Hang on a minute, like, who is this guy? Why am I putting all my trust in this person? And what are they doing? Do they even know,
Mhm.
what they're bringing in and calling it into the space?" It's so interesting. And exactly what you said, just because they're advanced in a way, maybe technologically, doesn't mean they're advanced, mature, and emotionally,
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting.
Mhm. And I've seen it because in my experience, in my case, the facilitator, he was very well intended, and
Mhm.
he was very much um, dedicated to offer a space of safety, but out of ignorance or out of the need to help a lot, there's also this trap that we might call in a lot of things and we don't even like he wasn't even questioning.
Yeah,
I believe one
yeah,
of the things I actually learned in those spaces is funny enough because see this is the reality of my experience. I only had to interact with this plant medicine just few times to be able to catch certain points of essence, which was Georgie, the love is in you. The powers is always yours. You don't need anything external. You have to take small steps to be able to embody your expression. It's not happening overnight. Like
yes,
you don't
yes, yes,
expect
yes.
to come here because you're going to come here again and again, 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 and you might get there or you might not. So,
Mm,
like, you need a sustained dedication, which is like every
yes,
day, a little bit of like awareness, a little bit of questioning every day. And one of the things that I learned in those spaces, funny enough, but that's why I think that also what happens with this plant medicines, the plant medicines are actually revealing what is in somebody's consciousness.
yes, yeah, yeah.
Because for me, it was always kind of like this overall message: question everything,
Mhm,
question everything. Why do I do what I do? Why do I take this?
mhm.
My reason. And when I think I know my reason, question it again. Is this helping me? Yes, that's helping me because of this. But then for how long? Yeah,
Mhm.
there's a limit. There's not a limit. Like, where are the nuances? Like,
Yes.
keep seeing the entire spectrum. And it taught me to question everything.
Mm.
And from that point on, I understood on a very, very deep level that every single time I think I know, or every single time I take a decision, or it's not questioning myself, but to question what if there are other possibilities? What if there are other perspectives? What are other nuances that I haven't been able to see or integrate yet? And yeah, it was an important piece, this one, to question,
Yeah,
to find like the deeper truths and like
yeah,
the aspects of like why certain things are the way they are.
yeah. I mean, I like what you said about the power and where are you putting, and you mentioned it a little bit earlier as well. I think that one is such a huge one, and like you said, it's so subtle. It's so subtle that we might not even realize it. But I
Mhm.
mean, in my experience, and um, I think in most of the ceremonies that I've had, again, it kind of depends. It's funny where the line kind of crosses because it's like it's not necessarily. sometimes about the medicine, it's also about the space and the
Mhm.
support, because I feel like in a lot of my experiences that I've had, there was a big emphasis on using the body and what's happening for you and empowering you.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's interesting, but I can imagine that there's also a lot happening where there's not doing that. And at the end of the day, I guess it depends on the consciousness of the person who's holding the space?
Yeah, it's in my space was also the same, but this is where the ambivalence came.
Okay.
Because if it would have been the space set up in a way that is, okay, let's call for the purest, purest energy that exists in this creation, which is source itself. Okay, let's let's stop going to the middleman, to archangel so and so, to whoever, so whoever to whoever. Okay, let's because there's a lot of like, oh, like Pleiadians are coming and whatever other beings and whatever other constellations and systems, and like, why? Like, why? When I can work directly with my inner source self and directly with the supreme intelligence, the mind of God that created everything. Like, why do I have to go to somewhere else? And kind of like be distracted on this like sidewalks instead of like going straight to source and like tackling what is inside of me. Like what is actually going on in my body, what is actually going on in my mind, in my
Yeah.
emotions, my consciousness.
Yeah, yeah.
I've seen it like, yes, it was very much geared to the body, but at the same time, when there are other aspects, they are like completely not addressed, which is
Yeah.
like the zapping of the minerals that are happening in these spaces that will generate extreme dysregulation, including in the hormonal system, nervous system, and a lot of people might experience episodes of possessions because of massive mineral consumption. Because this plants they eat, they consume, they kind of like use a lot of magnesium, for example, or copper or other elements. Okay, so a lot of these things, like there's a dysregulation that happens. There's this surge of energy, there's this surge of awareness that comes in the spaces, but there's like no proper integration after, which is
Yeah.
remineralization. And not even that, like it should be a preparation and a kind of a constant input of a balanced source of minerals, but also um, I would like a lot of people to, as many people as this will go to and will hear this, to know that these spaces might help as a doorway, as an opening, but without sustained
Yeah.
practice, which is minerals, meditation,
Yeah.
just like doing the nervous system regulation, the proper breathing, and not necessarily Wim Hof style, but actually the conscious connecting breaths and using our own technology as like humming. The humming calms down the nervous system. We can hum, we can use our vocal cords, we can use our own hands to move energy through our body. And like what is more empowering than doing these things for ourselves? This doesn't mean that we have to be like hyper independent and like only rely on ourselves. No, but
Mm.
to find the first the I guess acceptance that needs to be a consistent and perpetual slowly progression towards
Yeah.
healing, which are all these elements like
Yes.
learning about the inner child, learning about shadow work, learning about our emotions, how we work on a psychological level, how we work on an emotional level, having good energetic hygiene, like what do we watch, like what are we engaging in, who are we having like sexual experiences with, are we watching news, what kind of foods are we putting in our body? Like there are all sorts of things that
Yeah.
um not looked at with enough importance,
Yeah.
and these plants experiences will cause more dysregulation.
Mm.
on all those aspects. Even when somebody has like a decent praxis, it still might happen. Yeah, because there's a like there's it can come up a lot in that space. And then again, like I would like people to understand that if something comes up, like if something comes up from the subconscious mind, usually in a normal state, when we work on ourselves, if I'm working on myself, working with my inner child, like tackling like different experience from the past and working with my nervous system and taking the right supplements as like minerals and eating healthy and stuff like that, my consciousness and my subconscious mind will know when I'm ready to process a certain
Mm.
block of information, when I have the capacity to hold a certain emotion. Whereas in the spaces, like the plant medicine could trigger like a fast reaction and like a fast coming up, like eruption of
Yeah.
trauma, and that person that
Yes.
discovers a sexual trauma from when the person was 3 years old without having like a nervous system container that can hold that and a capacity that can
Mm.
hold that and the tools to work for that
Yeah.
into more dysregulation, and then shame will come in. Yeah, disempowerment will come in. How do you call it? Disheartening will come in because they are not prepared. Like this
Yes.
your system is not prepared.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting what you're saying, and this is it. I feel like obviously the process of the awakening is coming into more awareness, and ultimately what's happening, and which is why we're having these conversations and why it's so important to have these conversations, is because the awareness is full spectrum, it's on every level. So we're also bringing in the awareness into these ceremonies and these spaces, like, what's actually happening here. And as you're describing it, it's just kind of like, wow, it's so true. There's so much that is like unknown, and that's not necessarily like the steps aren't taken in some ways, like even as you were saying, like, yeah, in some ceremonies there is like focus on you and bring, but even with just a tiny little thing, like, let's announce it. You know
Mhm,
what I mean? Let's pronounce it loudly, let's make it clear, you
mhm,
know, and it's so mad. It's just like this little delicate communication. And as you're saying as well, the tools is so important because I think you're right, people, and again, it's like the question of why do we go to these spaces? Why? Because obviously it's different for everyone, and as we're all on, different levels of awareness, it's kind of like, and as you're saying, you've noticed things after the period as well. Looking back now, it makes more sense. So, and then you can offer that insight to other people as well. But it's kind of like, yeah, the
mhm.
tools that you're describing, because those aren't taught in necessarily in those spaces. Like sometimes I guess you can, but yeah, it's very interesting. But then I guess maybe in a way it's also just like in the deep end.
And something that just came to me,
Yeah.
that is slightly different, but I would like to touch on this because I feel it's important. I studied quite some time about the childhood developmental trauma and our attachment system, like how, like what is happening biochemically and emotionally and psychologically when we're getting in touch with our mom and being connected skin to skin to our mom and breastfed and all those kind of things. And it just came to me that there's also a level of codependency in the circles, because again, if we're
Mm.
circling back to what we were saying earlier, that people are getting very much attracted to these spaces because of the community and because of the love and like the music and the allowance to express and like be yourself and be who you are, and here is the space in which you are accepted and you're loved and you're validated. Actually, psychologically, what are we looking for? That's why the medicine is called the mother, and there are other medicines that are called the father, because people without or with, even if they realize or not, they form this bond as emotionally this substance, this plant is offering what was missing from their childhood, their development. So they're going to these spaces to get the love, to get the acceptance, to get the validation. Yeah, but that's not healing. And yes, it could help, as again, it could help temporarily to become aware, like, oh wow, I do have this
Yeah.
childhood wounds, like, oh wow, like, but like that's goes for a lot and most of people. Like there are very few very conscious parents that are like educating and teaching nowadays more than ever,
Yes.
for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, yeah.
But like, you know, our generations and before our generation, even like younger generations, what I'm talking about. But it is definitely
Yeah.
coming to more awareness, like gentle
Mm.
parenting and conscious parenting and all these kind of things, and you know, kind of like going away from this sleep training, whatever, contact deprivation and
Yeah,
other.
oh my days, I was literally talking to my friend about this the other day,
Mhm.
and we were
Mhm.
having this whole discussion because I was like, I just don't think I just don't think she was saying she's trying gentle parenting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I was
Yeah,
just like, it doesn't feel like
yeah. And I remember that a lot of people would, and also for myself included, like this the reference, like, oh, the mother. Because it was that kind of like nest, you know, we'll go to these places and it was this nest environment in which parts of ours would be held and validated in certain ways and be accepted in certain ways that would not actually happen in the outside world.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And again, that is one off, that's one episode, one day
Yeah.
or one weekend from a lifetime of
Yeah.
days. And
Yes, true.
so we have to go and create this reparative experiences
Yeah,
with ourselves, doing
100%.
work, going to therapy, having friends, having communities, building spaces. Like, for example, any cacao ceremony, any music gathering, like drumming or singing or painting or anything that's being done in a group with a more conscious intention, it can provide the same experience, not as a hype, not as a spiritual fluff that kind of like starts to be blown in all directions, the way it happens in the circles. But we can definitely experience that. We can go to have a tea with a dear friend and have like a vulnerable conversation and go through some processes with small steps and titrate it in a way that our consciousness and our emotional body and our nervous system is able to actually take in and process.
Yes, yes. I mean, what you're saying, I think, is really important because, I mean, it's just the part about the integration and taking it. And again, it's like we are the ones that have to do that, and whatever we're experiencing, it's up to us how we analyze it and then what we do from that point forwards. It's not just like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go then, it's gonna heal me. It just doesn't work like that. But also, the one what you said about the externalizing the power, like I think this is so big because
Mm,
around that period of time is when I feel like I finally stepped into my power,
mm,
and I did the medicine wheel foundation training, and that was so good. So it was all tied in. The medicine wheel wasn't anything to do with plant medicines, to be honest, which is why I found, it was really empowering. And then what was I gonna say? Yeah, and at the time, yeah, I was like listening to lots of astrology and
mhm,
tarot astrology stuff. And then I just remember one point it just hit me and it was just like, you need to stop doing this. Like it was just like boom, because yeah, it's the same thing,
mm,
externalizing this thing. And I feel like this is so important. But what I also wanted to say about it is, I feel like some people might not quite get it because I feel like for me it was such a moment of just realizing, it's you, it's in you. And it's this thing because I feel like it's like source.
mm,
Some people still believe that it's outside. That it's, you know what I mean? So it's like this thing. For me, that's like discernment number one, you know,
mhm.
with anything.
Question. Discernment questioning. Yeah.
Yeah, if it's something that's showing me to put it outside of me, then it's like, I'm not going there, it's just like, that doesn't make sense. But I think obviously for a lot of people, they don't have that, where
Mhm.
they know, the knowing. Do you know what I mean?
And that's why it's important to talk about the nuances.
Oh, yeah.
This is
Yes.
these are the keys. These are the, like, why and how we question it and how we kind of like reveal the entire spectrum, or like not necessarily the entire, because I guess that's like very hard to have it done in one conversation, but we are
Yeah.
revealing more and more of this spectrum. And all these things like tarot and energetic predictions and
Yes.
astrology, they are programs. And
Ooh.
there's no difference between these types of programming and the plant medicine programming, because
Yes. Yes.
guess what happens? There are certain traditions, like for example, Santa Daime, or like Orthodox, no, Catholic, I don't know. Yeah, they're
Yes.
Orthodox traditions, and they are doing plant ceremonies. They actually went to the government, and
Yeah.
they were approved to have these plant ceremonies as a form of spiritual evolution. Guess what these people see? They see saints. Yeah, they see whoever they learned from, the Bible and Mother Mary and Jesus and whoever. Okay, that's what they see. Why? Because they are projecting their own consciousness. The plant is actually facilitating an like a viewing of their own consciousness, but their consciousness is already programmed in that direction. And most people who are having ceremonies, let's say in the jungle, or like the ones I was in, that was not a religious context, it was more like a fusion. There was a lot of like anacondas and jaguars and stuff like that, because that is the collective consciousness.
Mm.
And like we're all kind of like linking to that collective, to that egregor, that was, and we're projecting that kind of experience. And it was very interesting because there are very few people like us that started to see the nuance
Mm.
we are experiencing ourselves.
Yes.
I haven't seen other stuff. Like I had
Yeah.
very few visions. Like I can count them on one hand. All right. I haven't traveled to past
Yes.
life,
Same.
whatever. And I was always like, oh
Same.
my gosh, there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with me. Why can I see? La 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 la.
But you mentioned that, and I always used to question as well, like, why are people so caught up on that as well? Like,
Mm.
yeah.
Yes. Because they were like, that is their belief system.
Mm.
And that's what their consciousness is going to project into this reality, what they've learned through astrology, tarot, what
Mm.
Pleiadian told, and like whatever teacher and guru,
Yes.
Georgie and whoever. So that's why I'm saying these are the distractions, these are the overlays. But
Mm.
behind all of these is our own innate intelligence and our organic blueprint that can be tapped into. And of course, there's a lot to discover in there. We have like an entire creation, like an entire universe in us that we're actually not paying enough attention to discover, because we're looking to something else that knows a little bit more. And
Mm. The
this doesn't
nuance.
mean that astrology cannot help, and this doesn't mean that plant medicine cannot help,
Yes. 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 Yes.
that knowing my constellations and like knowing the whatever the bodies were in the sky in the moment of my incarnation on this planet in this lifetime is not helping to get to know myself better. But then again, if I get hooked on, and then if I externalize it, like the whole point is to use these things as tools, and to use them as a point of reference, maybe once or twice, a limited period of time. If we're going back to, let's see where the stars in the sky, like what is this predicting, or let me pull the tarot deck again because I don't know what to choose.
Yes.
This is externalizing the power.
Yes. Exactly. It is externalizing your power.
So we can have one or two or three plant ceremonies with the intention, it's like, okay, how can I use this tool
Yeah.
get to know myself and to get into like um as connected to myself that is giving me the enough kind of like momentum to continue this outside the space, outside the circles, every day, to go back to myself, to get to know myself, to discover myself, to build the tools, the sustainability that is not actually available in those circles, and even like very, 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 in very few cases is offered. Now there are some practitioners and facilitators
Yes.
learning about trauma and stuff like that, and of course that is beneficial, but then this is absolutely incredible, this is incredible, but then again, if somebody wants to go back and
Mm,
revisit this, then that moment has to be questioned.
mm,
What am I looking outside of myself, or like why do I want to externalize my power?
mhm.
Oh, it's not an easy thing to
Yes.
face. And this doesn't mean that we have to have shame or to think like, oh my gosh, I'm not enough and I'm not powerful enough. It's not about that. It's
No,
about
it's not.
change happens in time and with
Oof.
like steps and consistency. So like the best approach is to like, you know what, let me have compassion to myself and like be so gentle and kind to myself and really hold myself in my shortcomings and hold myself in my sadness and in my anger, and how can I provide this space for myself. And at the same time, I could go to an astrological reading to get to know myself better, but not have that as an externalized
Yeah.
me
Yes.
tells me something. Yes, I can go to a cacao ceremony or to a singing circles, but
Mhm.
that is just to anchor even more what I'm
Yeah.
doing, just to complement what I'm doing already.
Mhm.
So these nuances are very, very, very important, which I'm very grateful to have discovered eventually.
Mhm.
Better later than ever.
Yeah, man. I mean, I totally agree with you, and it's so true. I feel like the further you go on this path, the more nuance becomes aware to you. And it's really not like this one way or the other. There's just so much that's involved in this thing. It's wild. But yeah, as you were saying, it's the same program, you
Mhm.
know, astrology, whatever. And it's just becoming aware of it and seeing it, and then 100%, then you can do it in a different way where you're not externalizing. But yeah, that's the thing about the externalizing I want to say, because you mentioned it at the beginning, you know, you said, you know, there are people who or they're acting like they're outside of this universal consciousness, unity consciousness, right?
Mhm.
And it's so interesting because I feel like this, you know, that's part of it as well. And it's just, it's the journey, because when you come into it, then you start to realize, but obviously when you don't know, you don't know. But I guess even in this way, that's part of what you said there about acting as if you're not. This source is out, it's over there. You know, I
Mhm.
just, I mean, I'm not. It's so interesting this thing, because it's like, you know, in a way you think that it's you're supposed to humble yourself and say, What do you mean? That's I'm not. It's not me." Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And it's
Mhm.
like, to on one level that makes sense, but then it's like, well, actually,
That's where the nuance and like that's like the trickery of this reality we're experiencing, because there is a level of humbleness
yes,
to acknowledge like, wow, I am a spark,
yes,
I am the embodiment of God's source, I am the intelligence of the supreme intelligence, I'm part of that. And at the same time, I live in this reality.
yes.
Even if I'm like sometimes kneeled and like tired and I collapse in depression, whatever it might be, this
Mm,
doesn't mean that I'm broken. And
mm,
because we are of course sometimes experiencing these, and I had this myself, I was like, oh, I really want to be connected to this divine supreme intelligence, like, I want to be connected to a source all the time and I want to feel it all the time, and sometimes I don't.
yeah,
you know. And yes, it is annoying, and there is that comes with a level of frustration and with a level of anger, whatever might be, and depression, whatever other human things. But that's part of us integrating it. That's
Mm,
part of what I use, to use a trap as a freeing mechanism, to use the concept as something that gets you out of the concept.
mm,
Or sometimes we use cognition to explain things, or we use concepts to explain things, but actually it's all energetic. And if we're like zooming out and we're seeing everything from like the source perspective, it's just like frequency and energy and stuff like
yes.
that. But then when we're in the thick of it, like I don't
Yeah.
fucking give a shit about the, you know, the concept. Like because I'm having a visceral experience of
Mm,
sadness or anger or whatever
yeah.
it might be, or like I feel like I cannot do it, and I feel like this is so hard, and I wish I can use my voice a little bit more, and you know, come and show
Mm.
up on Jess's podcast with ease. And it's not always
Yeah.
easy.
It's not always smooth sailing.
Yeah, but at the same time, the beauty of consciousness and the beauty
Mm,
of using and working with consciousness directly is that we learn to there is this possibility to lean into these experiences and using the trap itself to see it,
yes.
to accept that there might be, you know, a limitation or a trap, and then be divergent and actually
Yeah.
basically leave it and go to
Yeah.
the next step.
Expand.
And then of course it might come that we find another thing, and then another, and they're like all these layers
Yeah.
that are appealing. But then the agency we start to have on the process, and
Mm-hmm.
that's how we are rebuilding, you know, like the consciousness as like a whole is through having these experiences and to keep working through them. And then it comes like, I've seen this before. I did this. Like I have like a different way to move through it now with ease. And sometimes we collapse again, but like there's probably something else there at the root that
Mm-hmm.
we haven't been able to uproot
Mm-hmm.
last time because we didn't have the capacity. We didn't have the enough wisdom. And it's not that that wisdom is not ours, it is ours, but it's not actually being unraveled
Mm-hmm.
in one day or
Yeah.
2 days or 1 year, because we are massive energetic beings and we hold massive amounts of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And literally, we can get fried and electrocuted by our own awareness if this doesn't happen gradually.
Yes.
Why plant medicine is not actually very like
Yes.
ideal
Yes.
situation, because there's a lot of frequency that coming really quickly into somebody's
Mm.
system, into somebody's body, and it
Yeah.
get it overwhelmed.
Yeah. Just wanted to rewind a little bit. What you were saying about. Gosh, now I'm losing it. Oh yeah, just yeah, yeah. It's not always smooth sailing, and this is obviously the process. But in the famous words of Georgie, um, I remember you always used to say, "Whatever you're experiencing, send it back to source." Like this is because source is choosing to experiencing this through me now.
Mhm.
So it's always compassion with it, and again, that's another empowerment aspect to it, like,
And that's actually a conversation we had in the Netherlands
Yeah.
when this is something Ricky was sharing with us, and I also had it in a different form, but it was the same thing as when I find a piece that is I don't know, maybe I feel helpless, or maybe I feel a little bit victimy. Sometimes it happens, or
Yeah, of course.
all of these things. What I do, I can create a better communication with source in that moment,
Mhm,
instead of like waiting for a force like a savior to come, like some
mhm.
whatever god or whatever angel to come and save me. What
Yeah.
I do is take that part of me that is not feeling fully integrated and send it back to source, and imagine that source is pulsating love in that, and is pulsating harmony, and is balancing it out.
Amazing.
And then that's how I create the connection.
Love that. I love that.
The connection is in me, like
Yes.
sometimes I have this tendency to say like, oh, source is here, because that's also part of the programming,
Yes.
like automatically consciousness goes like, oh, it's something else. I don't
Yes.
see how it happens. But then I was like, okay, like what is it? And actually it's a feeling.
Yeah, totally.
That's what
Totally.
people are kind of like attracted towards this medicine spaces, because there is so much love and there's so
Yeah.
much liberated emotion, like
Yeah.
there's much like space of allowance and nurturing in that space.
Mhm.
And that's why people are like this, they have the tendency to go there. But
Mhm.
that's what we
Mhm.
can use, the feeling. We can use the feeling as the medium, as the agent, as the connection that's always
Mhm.
linking us to
Mhm.
the most integrated whole part of ourselves, and
Mhm.
also source, because source is a feeling.
Yeah, 100%.
And the feelings is kind of like trickling in and out and weaving through this existence, in maybe like a good cup of tea, and maybe a hug from somebody we love, or maybe snuggle with our pet, or a kiss, or like a certain fabric, like the way we touch something, like there's this feeling that comes in our
Mhm.
body, and like that feeling is nourishing us. So
Mhm.
that is actually source, and
Yeah, I
that's
love that.
how we can use those parts. They're like pain, they feel pain, or like this fragments of ours, and we can actually tap into like, oh, how source might feel, like how is this like nurturing
Mm.
energy, and like this loving kindness awareness.
Mhm.
And then that is how we create the connection, and we
Mhm.
realize that that is very, very much sustainable, and
Yes.
much us
Mm.
working directly with our own
Yeah.
intelligence, with source
Mhm.
itself, other than kind of like getting like distracted by this external means,
Yeah.
which can be in nervous system healing. We do have resources, we use
Yes.
resources, like how do you call it, like a stuffed animal, or like a
Mm.
blanket that
Yes, 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 yes.
or like my favorite sweater, like my favorite scarf, like a cup of something, like a tea I like, or like I have a list of free melodies that I go to whenever I feel dysregulated. But
Mm.
these resources are there to create a support system
Mm.
that could help me to get into a regulated enough space that I will be able then, it's almost like now I'm riding the bike with the helping wheels.
Yes, 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 yes.
And then it comes a time when these resources are not going to be needed anymore, because I
Yeah.
practiced
Yeah, 100.
enough and I used the tools for a while, but now I can ride the bike by myself,
Yes.
wheels only.
Yeah, exactly. And this with related to the plant medicines, I feel like it's important to apply. Do you know what I mean? It's a tool.
Yeah,
Use it until you can ride the bike on your own.
yeah, yeah.
But
And not
also,
that much, because it can create like it zaps out the elements, and
mhm,
it creates like more dysregulation. So yes, it can be used, but of course use it with discernment, use it with a good preparation in advance, already going through all the reasons why are you going there, like what is your very, very precise intention. And you always should be some of that intention to connect with self, to divine intelligence, and organic uh,
yeah.
intelligence of oneself, and to be kind of like prepared. And I know like a lot of people say that one night with ayahuasca is 10 years of psychotherapy, and like is going to be an experience. It is a powerful,
Mm.
experience and is going to stretch consciousness in many, many, many directions and in many, many, many ways. But I would say just take breaks and allow,
Mm.
the wisdom or
To land.
threads, yeah, to land properly.
Yes.
Take as long as is needed until maybe
Yeah.
you might need like another experience or two, but then again, like the
Mm.
preparation in between has to have a foundation, has to be a
Mm.
structure in there,
Mm.
emotionally, mentally, psychologically, uh, like mineral and remineralization and stuff like that. Because yeah, it could be helping, and at the same time it could be like jarring
Yeah. Yeah.
thing at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, totally. So just wanted to talk, you mentioned quickly the programming and the conditioning of this. I think this is the thing, because so much of religion, and not just that, but even the spiritual world, and like a lot of things, even sometimes I feel like just the titles of books, like how to da 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 da, it's this
Yes.
constant externalization, like constant. And so this programming is so deep. So obviously, for some people, it must be an initial reaction, like what you're talking about. I'm not source, like I am not God, But and then also, I feel like there's this misinterpretation where you think that because people have that knowing, and like you said, it's a knowing, it's a feeling, it's not just like some idea.
Mhm.
Then there's like this weird attachment to ego, but
Yeah.
that's not what it is. And
Yes.
even like the way you're describing it, it's actually this humbleness
Mhm.
into this reconnecting and,
But
sourcing from there.
that's how it is. The moment you question it, the moment I allow to question my godliness, that means I cannot be in my ego. Because ego probably would not even allow me to see that I'm being inflated. That's
Yeah.
the whole point of questioning, asking the right questions and constantly wondering, oh, am I humble? But why am I humble? And like, okay, I do see I'm part of like God, and I'm like made in the image of God, which is like sound and light.
Yes.
What other people might think.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and it's that thing. It's like, well, like
Mm.
I have that the same fabric as source, as God, and this doesn't mean that I can walk around and be inflated as like, I'm God, and I know it all, or I can heal everybody. Like, it's not about that.
Yeah, it's not about,
Yeah,
yes.
it's about just like nurturing that connection to
Mm.
myself and to the divine wisdom
Yes.
inside of me.
And ultimately, the myself and the divine aren't different things, so
Exactly. And then
not myself.
the whole purpose is to be like as balanced, as harmonious as possible being, that I don't
Mhm.
have to tell anybody anything or to convince anybody of anything. I just am. I just express myself. It's like source expressing, through me. And like I give my own personal nuance to that, because it's a co-creation. But then I don't have to go around and tell people like, oh, you should be thinking this, or you should be doing that, or come to me, I'm going to heal and I'm going to take away all your problems. That is the ego part. There's a humbleness that comes.
Yes, that is the ego part.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's just knowing that, and I like what you said there, because I feel like actually there needs to be a big integration of the ego to come to this realization,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because otherwise, like you said, you can end up in the God complex or whatever, which isn't the point.
Well, I've seen it many times, and it's so funny. I had the conversation with a friend of mine the other day from those days in circles,
Yeah.
and there are a lot of people who look like they're very nice and they're very friendly and they're very loving and stuff like that,
Mm.
but they do have like a huge ego underneath,
Mhm.
especially in these circles, because they feel like
Mm.
they have powers and they can work with energy, and then but this happens in like new age community and spiritual community at large is
Yes, very
it's
true.
the guru thing is, you know, like walking very composed and like talking very slowly and like you better listen to me. But that's why I'm saying like there's so many subtleties, and it's actually is really beautiful to engage in kind of decoding the subtleties.
Hmm.
And you know, it's not part of like being judgmental, it's being assertive and like assessing things. It's not like throwing judgments or confining anybody's in like a specific label or specific like an experience, like I'm going to label this plant medicine experience as being bad. No, like it's about these nuances. Like the more I travel on my own path, and like you know, like the more my path is being revealed, like I tend to like understand more and more the importance of nuance and the importance of questioning, and that like the entire spectrum, like more of the spectrum that my limited mind at that point in time was like stuck on. And it was something I want to say about something else, but I kind of like lost it.
Yeah, I mean, the nuance is just so important, and I feel like that gets lost a lot in the world with all the, black and white cancel. It's like, and people just put people in boxes and
Yeah.
because of their beliefs, but it's just not realistic. That's just not realistic.
I think I wanted to say something about the programming and how important to observe this programming, because I remember in those circles I was in, we were having uh like almost like two distinctive categories of people coming. One, it was like the new age spiritual people, like the hippie style, and doing the whole thing, like the angels and the tarot and the energy work and the Reiki and stuff like that. And we also had more conservative participation, which were people like from the business world or from corporations or from, I don't know, maybe educational systems and stuff like that. It was really interesting. And I remember so well the fact that these people from this mentally, more mental perspective and more mental experience of life would not have any visions, would not go to any past lives, would not have any of these experiences.
Mm,
For them, it was crying, screaming, purging, or resistance, like the resistance, you know, the need to control, because it's quite how do you call it? Quite we can find it in this corporate environments, is the need to control, the micromanaging, you know,
yeah.
like manage the team, manage the project, manage this, manage that. So that's what I'm saying. The plant medicine actually was reflecting
Yeah.
the way of their consciousness
Yeah.
work. And they were
Always.
like this, you know, like I don't want to let go, and like, you know, like micromanaging, and they were like putting their glass next to their whatever lip balm and next to their little rock they had from the street, because they're not into crystals and stuff like that. So how do you explain the fact that this very mind oriented
Yeah.
population, okay, or beings would have no visions, yeah, just very visceral kind of experience, like purging and crying and screaming and like shivers, like tremors and stuff like that. And all the spiritual, new agey, hippie community would see angels and archangels and Pleiadians and extraterrestrials and past lives and symbols. And how do you explain this?
Mm.
If this is not obvious that this
Yes.
plant is actually, and like reality is doing the same thing.
Yeah, well, I was just
We
gonna say that.
agreed on this reality. We've
Yeah,
been programmed to
yeah,
believe we cannot fly, we cannot live forever, we're gonna go grow old, da 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 da. And the programming is running in our consciousness, and we're projecting this reality
yeah,
outside ourselves. And actually, we are creating
yeah,
it.
100. But the thing is, this is a very serious thing. This is not some lofty thing that's just like, no, this is actually what's happening, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and it's very interesting to have these parallels, to
Hmm.
be able to connect these
To
dots.
see, yeah.
Yeah, and again, another thing being, I'm like Christian Orthodox by birth, and for I've read like I never liked this religious thing, but my
Mhm.
grandma is very religious, and to my surprise, my parents they became very religious lately.
Wow.
I was not expecting this ever. My mom and dad, they never went to church. Like they, they would go like once a year and stuff like that. And I remember that when my grandma was about to die, she started to have visions of like
Wow.
Virgin Mary and whoever. My dad had an experience maybe like 2 weeks ago that he had a dream with the Virgin Mary, like that came
Wow.
and saved him and helped him to cross like a field that was like a blizzard outside and stuff like that. Tibetan, if you're asking a Tibetan person what they're going to dream, they're not going to dream Virgin Mary. They're
No,
going
of course not.
to,
Yes.
And if you're
Yeah.
asking like an indigenous people from South America, most likely they're going to dream animals and the spirits of the jungle and etc. etc. So that's how this a part of the reality is actually being revealed to us
Mhm.
almost, in our face
Yeah, literally.
at these things.
Mhm.
And it's almost obvious to me, particularly at least to myself, that the consciousness is going to project what the consciousness chose to believe in.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. It's almost like as well the universe will meet you where you are,
Yes.
you know? And
Yes.
so it's up to you to
Mhm.
be where you are and where, like if you don't like something, change it, you know?
Yeah. And that's why people like us, for example, that kind of had the experience with the plant medicines, we had like a deeper experience of ourselves.
Yeah.
It was like I was almost like started to bring into awareness and experience the other parts of me. They were like maybe in the shadow, maybe hidden, maybe shy, maybe whatever. And then I was like, oh, okay, so this is what I'm learning here. I'm learning to step more into my own beingness, step in my own authenticity. And this is something that I've seen in your case and other people that they've been in the circles, like they managed to see that this was a path and a tool to
Yes.
help us, kind of like discover
Yes.
a little bit, maybe a little bit more courage, maybe a little bit more, yeah, the momentum. It's like, come on, like, come on, start showing yourself a little bit more.
Yeah, stand in your power was mine.
Yeah, stand in your power. Exactly. Take the stance of who you are.
Yes.
That was enough to kind of like open the
Mhm.
gate, to open the door for us. But it's an ongoing experience,
Mhm.
and I
Yeah.
still have to work through a lot of other things. But I've seen that if I'm going to a plant medicine now, it's not going to help me other than adding onto my insight, adding more to that specific insight, but I still have to do the work outside that space.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. One, yeah,
100%.
totally with that. I think this is what Naivi was saying in the other episode. A lot of people who are new to the spiritual path and to the spiritual origins, because it's so popular now, they just go straight to it. But then they're coming out. I think she said something like a shell of who they were, because it's just not just. this one miracle thing that's gonna it might be like that for some people, but it's a very incremental, slow process. It doesn't happen overnight, and it's
Because
not about the medicine, you
yeah,
know, it's about your evolution, you know?
it can be actually more fragmenting than helping, especially the ones
Yeah.
who are new and they don't have necessarily too much of an energetic
Yeah.
hygiene, and they don't have necessarily, like, they're still ambivalent in their perceptions or the way the consciousness works. I can
Yeah.
see there's this reality here, but but no, I've been taught like this, or like, yeah, you know, there is like the ones, especially the ones at the beginning of the journey,
Yes.
it will go in, and I will think that most of the times will come out more fragmented. It will
Yes.
come more hyped as well, because like, wow, I just felt the connection, and like, wow,
Mm.
I'm I found something that I resonate with, and that love, and all other aspects of beauty that happen in that space. But if they will, you know, if they could fast forward in the future, like few years, they will understand straight away they're
Mhm.
actually more fragmented now
Mm.
after that experience, instead of like
Yeah.
taking it slowly and
Yes, it is. I mean, I wanted to talk about this a bit actually. I mean, for me, I think this is one big difference because I already had a deep meditation for like 4 to 5 years before I
Mhm,
embarked with the plant. So it was very different to like what we're talking about here, I guess.
mhm,
So, you know, that's a foundation really, you know. But
mhm,
yeah, you mentioned as well just now that at some points, yeah, it can you can use it as a tool, but then at one point this is something that I also came to into like recognition of that
mhm.
and I guess it touches on what you were saying earlier as well about how, you know, it's always so magical and you can do all this stuff and you can heal and you know, but then there's a point where it's like you can also do that naturally
Absolutely.
without.
Mhm,
So there's a funny point where it's like, okay, when do we
mhm.
move over the threshold, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, these experiences, I would say that it would be ideal if there would be just that kind of a reminder
Mhm.
that this is how consciousness works and can operate, if you are dedicated to uncover it and you're dedicated to explore with it. And we have experiences that are full of magic and full of joy, and we don't take any substances. But where is it coming from? It comes from connection. It comes from like the security and the safety build with ourselves and between each other. And every single time, for example, if I'm listening to a piece of music, yeah, you know, listen to your album, for example, or going into the sand or the ocean, the sea, like that, it can be a very magical experience in itself if there's a full present being in that body. And unfortunately, when we're talking about the new agey spirituality and the plant medicines, there's a disembodiment that happening there
Mm.
most of the times. And
Yes, and already there's a disembodiment culturally, you know?
exactly. There's already a disembodiment, and that's like being heightened in those spaces,
So
because it
true.
kind of takes people out in this like far
Mm.
out space and like other
Yeah.
dimensions and connecting to all of these beings. But actually, there's so much. I mean, like a lot of the juice it's found in presence,
Yeah.
in this like being and inhabiting my own body, for
Yeah.
example. And that's what you're saying about meditation. And it's something I because of my accident and my story, I kind of walked away from meditation because I was already in like a very vegetative collapsed state after my accident. So I was already drowsy and sleepy, and the last thing I needed is to meditate. But now that I started to get more momentum and more energy, I want to go back into meditation, because if I cannot sit with myself for like 45 minutes in
Mhm.
meditation on my ass without getting distracted, overwhelmed, whatever, whatever. I mean, like I can do all of these
It's
things,
true. It's so true.
getting distracted, but like to learn how to navigate it and cope with it,
Yes.
then I'm not gonna find any healing in plant
Mhm.
medicines. You know, like
Yeah.
to face myself in
Yeah.
meditation is more powerful than thinking
Yes.
to
Well,
face.
yeah. I mean, that's exactly it. And this is why meditation is so powerful because, and it's exactly like I said, it's to come back into the body, to
Mhm.
reconnect, to reintegrate because we're scattered at the moment, or we can be. And then it's like meditation, it's just like, it has all the principles of embodiment, if you really sit with it. Because
Yeah.
I think some people think that it's just about mind, but it's like, no, 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 no. You get in touch with your body, like what's actually going on here?
Like the listening, if it's not the second nature to be able to listen to myself all the time,
True.
like it's not even that. For example, yesterday I was feeling anxiety, like I was
Yes, exactly.
anxious energy. I was like, oh, what is this coming from? Like it had no
Mm.
explanation. But I think I was a little bit overly stimulated. I had different things to do, talking to people, arranging things, etc., etc. And like I noticed that I had this feeling, but I had to sit down, and kind of like be with it, and it dissipated.
Yeah. Well, that's the magic. That's what happened.
That's where the magic comes from. Whereas before I would go to
Yeah.
a beer or a cigarette or
Yes.
music or calling a friend or
Yes.
asking Archangel so and so to come and save me because like, oh my God,
Wow.
like externalizing that power. Whereas now it's like,
Yeah.
oh, there's something going on in my body. And
What is it?
what I needed in that space
Inquire.
is to sit down and calm and like breathe,
Yeah,
and
man.
it went away because my brain was like overly stimulated. And I've been like, I don't know, 15 minutes meditating. I got up and I was perfectly
Mm.
fine.
But I'm so happy you've brought this up because I feel like it's just brought all of what we're saying into the crux of it. And it's like, this is literally it. You know what I mean? And to be honest, I feel like for me, the plant medicines and the mushrooms really helped me to do that. Like, but exactly like saying, it's the tool
Mhm.
because everything was so intense in those experiences, and it was just like fudge. Like, what do I do? Well, I just have to sit with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
And I really feel like this is the journey. This is the work. And as you said, it's this externalization that we can just go to all these other things, but actually, and it's so simple, like it's literally so simple, and we just need to start feeling.
yeah, 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 absolutely. And yes, the mushrooms can help. I have a friend that she does her own journeys, and she takes mushrooms and she puts like a mask, like an
Oh,
eye
yeah,
mask
yeah.
on her face, and she lies down, and that's it.
Mm.
Like that is work. That
That
is
is
like,
work. That's
yeah,
true.
inner work. She sits with it, like whatever comes up, she kind of like filtering through her own system, through her own
Yeah.
wisdom, own body. She doesn't invoke anything. She's like doing like a very simple like grounding meditation and connecting to the highest of her own blueprint and aspects of intelligence. And she takes it and she goes on this journey, not talking to other people, not listening to music, not messing around, not having any distraction. That is deep, deep, deep inner work and shadow work. But again, it's not necessarily suitable for everybody because she does have a background of like therapy with like holistic psychology. It's not just like Jungian, whatever,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
whatever. But like she already tapped into certain aspects of herself, like certain
Mhm.
parts, the inner child, and all the other things. So again, like all of these things, I would say to be in this like series that of yours, like I would um yeah recommend and suggest people to listen to this entire series and
Yeah,
kind of
totally.
get all the threads and all the information
Yeah.
because there's so much we can
This
cover, and like there's so
Yes,
much I experience, like there are other experiences that are
true,
complementary.
man. So much. That's so true. Yeah, and I just also wanted to touch on what you said about the because I feel like, for me, the message is so strong that it's like you're tapping into your organic abilities here. So there's a process of just letting go, releasing, and then the one thing that was really powerful from the medicine wheel course that I did was that the teacher, I just remember this so clearly, and I feel like this is so important when it comes to this. I think I did mention it in the introduction that I did in the series, but yeah, someone was talking about mushrooms and how he had this experience, and then it was just so funny. The teacher was just, just like, "Great. Well, now the next step is to do that without the mushrooms."
True.
Yeah, and it
True.
was just like,
Yeah.
mic drop. And it's just like, fudge, of course, like why would it be any other way? And
Mhm.
honestly, since I've stopped, it started happening now. Like you were saying earlier, I've started using my hands. I've started using my voice. Whenever the moment comes, like I will naturally go through this purge,
Mhm.
and then when it comes, I know it's here. I know
Mhm.
what to do. You know what I mean? And it's without all of that stuff. You know?
There's a lot of resources like nature and like
Yeah.
music and the blanket and a cup of tea and our own whatever we have, the hands and the breath,
Yes.
struggle, whatever, like, but they're like, again, these things, they have to be learned because
True.
there's not one thing that suits every stage of our healing. For example, like sometimes we might need to punch a bag. We
Oh
might
my
need
word.
to let that anger go. And sometimes we have to sit with it. So to know when to let it out and when to be with it and to observe it, it's a very, very important piece. And again,
Yeah.
nuances and like all of these things we're not learning in the circles. Yeah, in the circles, there's just like hype,
It's
one
like,
burst of energy, and basically you're left off with everything that you had to deal with before. And there's a lot of
and
pile of other
yeah,
stuff that came up to the surface now. And unless
yeah.
whoever is doing that has
The
the
tools.
the tools, is difficult. Yeah.
Yeah. Wait, you said the sentence and it's so freaking big. Not everything is going to be helpful on depending on the stage of our journey. Because wow, that's so true. And it's not linear, and sometimes it's like we're going in these funny directions.
There's no protocol. Like
Yeah,
there's no specific protocol. If this
yeah,
happens, you do this. If this happens, you do
yeah,
that. It's not about that. And learning about the nervous system lately, this is one of the things, like learning when to allow um, a certain activation and like a certain process that didn't happen in a childhood or in a previous experience to happen, so we complete that phase. There's a time and a space for that, but there are also moments in which we could bypass by doing that. We might assume like, oh, because I've done it like that last time, this time is, and that's why it's so important to build this
yes,
connection to ourselves, because maybe now if I'm feeling a little bit like icky and like drowsy and whatever, I feel like I need to shake and I need
yeah,
to
yeah, 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 yeah,
walk,
exactly.
whatever. But then if there's sadness or if there's something that needs to be looked at and be with, the best thing I would do is to sit down and put my hands on my body. It's like, oh, what is this showing me? What is this teaching me? So it's very important to know when,
Yeah,
for
yeah,
apparently the same symptom or the same experience, is not always the same resolution. There's not
yeah,
always
yeah, yeah.
out
Yeah,
to.
that's really big. I love that. Yeah, definitely. And what was I gonna say now? So true. I feel like for you, it sounds like this journey it sounds like what you're describing, as you've seen it in other people, but it's also what's happened with you. Like, you went through the process of plant medicine and exploring, and obviously you were supporting this in the circles, and
I loved it for
yeah.
the time being.
But I feel like you've you stepped away, taken a pause, and now you've given yourself the tools that weren't provided.
Yes, and I also tested myself by taking mushrooms to
Yeah.
see where is my consciousness now.
You mean
And yeah,
after the
after like
pause?
2 years,
Okay, good.
2 years and a half of like pause, I was like, okay, like let me experience and let me see what is actually happening right now, knowing
Mm,
all of these things and kind of like having the nuances and stuff like that. And it was a very simple experience that was again revealing the same thing. Like this, you're experiencing yourself, and this is your abilities. This is your innate intelligence that comes through because there's a lot of frequency coming from, and yes, there's like a temporary DNA activation that happens, and of course I would have like higher sensory perceptions and heightened awareness. But it was again just like me experiencing myself and seeing what parts of my consciousness are still blocked, what kind of shadows I'm having lingering where, all of these things. And it was it was very, very simple in that
mm.
way, as like a reminder. And again, like no, nothing extraordinary this time, because I feel like I've integrated in such a way that was actually facilitating like a clear communication to myself. But the message was, see, you don't need this, you're doing
Oh, wow.
day, every day. And it's
Wow.
okay if you kind of like need the confirmation, but here you go, you have the confirmation. Um,
Mm.
but see, like,
Wow.
yeah, and it was like, oh, it's like, oh, there's no different. Like, even if I've learned a lot of other things in between, and I've changed and like my world crumbled at least 2 times since then, and my reality was changed like at least 2 or 3 times since then, and I've experienced like uh, deaths and rebirths and stuff like that. Ultimately, it was like, see, like this is your intelligence. Like you are this very wise um, system of like intelligence that you can always use it.
Yes.
You know,
Yes, that's what I was gonna say because you used the word simple, and that's exactly the point. And it's the point when it comes to source. It's the point when it comes to the externalization, knowing that we are source. The point is, you are enough. Just you and your body, and it's enough.
Mhm.
And there, that's what I was gonna say. The simple, yeah, it's so simple. The body's technology is so simple, but it's so powerful.
Yeah, and it can be very tricky because I wanted to see like, is this going to grab me? Is it going to
Mm.
kind of like make me want some more, or like going to the next one and stuff like that? And I was in that space, and I remember at some point I was having this experience. I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. It is an amazing experience. Like my
It
sense,
is, yeah.
like the music, the way I was feeling the music, and the way I was feeling myself. And then I was like, yes, yes, that is happening,
Mm.
but nothing is actually stopping me from creating this and
Mm.
recreating this in my day-to-day reality.
Yeah, I love that.
Is I allow myself to do it, or I will have another layer of programming or another layer that tells me like, oh no, you're not able. You can only do this only if you're taking mushrooms, And then I was like, oh wow,
Yeah.
like, but who is doing this work, and like who is doing this process is my own consciousness
Yeah,
of
it's
this.
I.
It's
Yeah.
not a mushroom, because
Mm.
I'm questioning, yeah, I'm wondering. And then I was like, oh. And after that, this is what I took from this last experience. I was like, wow, I can actually see like more beauty, and I can
Mm.
have like a more intense experience of music, of it's touching something if I allow myself.
Mm.
It's not telling myself, oh, you're going to have this experience, and kind of like predicting it or like
Mhm.
forcing it.
Or
It's about
planning it.
allowance, yeah, or planning. It's about allowing. So oh, oh,
Yeah.
but that's how the consciousness works. We can deprogram anything and everything just by using our consciousness. And then like it's so interesting because now if I do it and if I move into that space, I'm getting the ecstasy and I'm getting the hype and I'm getting the I don't know, the thrill of it just because I'm doing it, me with myself in this sober, very day-to-day state. But I was like, oh, I figured this out, or like, oh, I caught myself in that with that wound there or with that shadow there, and I was able to
Mm.
move through it in this way. It's like, and it
Yeah.
gives me a sense of like fulfillment. And
Yes.
I believe that these small steps,
Yes.
they accumulate and
Yeah,
they kind of
100%.
they're staying in my bag. Every
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
breakthrough, every fulfillment, every return
Yeah.
to my own intelligence or whatever. And of course, like even those parts in which I'm not feeling great, but then having the power to hold myself in that and
Yeah.
allowing myself to be in that space without
Yeah.
judging myself or without shaming myself, that is massive. That
Yeah,
is,
and resisting.
you
Yeah, totally. I think this is the it's like stop trying. You get to a point where you just stop running away from
mm,
your experience. And sometimes you have to go down into the depths of the darkest thing to realize that you need that the simple technology is just stop running away, And it
mhm.
totally it brings in this like gratitude for just being here, the simplest things, this little.
Actually quite
And
simple.
and sometimes you said like sometimes we use those crutches to keep running away, you
Mhm.
know?
Yeah, yeah. That's why question everything.
Yes. Yes.
Question
Yeah,
everything.
yeah.
Mhm.
Did you have anything else to say about the fine line of when these things can start being bad for you? Because I
Oh,
think that's something that hasn't really been touched on yet anyway in the series.
yeah. I feel there's a fine line from the get-go, from the very beginning, even before having this experience, because I heard it and I had it time and time again. It can be so stimulating and it could be
Mm,
so heightened and it could be like so revealing
mm,
that is almost like shadowing and like blocking the critical thinking or like that part of the awareness that would be able to understand
mm,
that this is just a temporary experience that happens when I'm taking this substance that is temporary activating my DNA with like very, very high frequencies. But this is not sustainable.
mm,
And this is not something that I should be looking for or something that I would like to experience on a day-to-day basis because I believe there's such a fantasy that's being born in somebody's psyche and in somebody's consciousness that keeps wanting this thing, that feeling to be experienced every day. And there's almost like an ease sometimes in the processes in that space because in those spaces when somebody feels like crying they will cry and they would not necessarily, not always, but sometimes it happens, they will not have the shame aspect or like, oh, there's something wrong with me. There's easeful facilitation in that process, and they might tend to attach to that ease, they might tend to attach to that like flow that is specific to these places, thinking that in my external life it's very hard for me to tap into my feelings, or it's very hard for me to acknowledge my shadows, or it's very hard for me to do so and so, or process certain information or certain emotions or certain traumatic experiences. But that is actually not true. The consciousness and the psyche can reach a level of processing with more ease through training. It's like going to the gym, like running for a marathon, learning how to swim. Yeah. The more you do it, the more somebody does it, the psyche and the consciousness is going to reinforce, yeah, this muscle of processing with more ease, with more grace, being more attuned, being more sensitive to myself, to the world, to the way I interact. So I would like people to have this awareness even before stepping into that circle, because the moment they step into the circle, the subtleties are incredibly blurred, and the power of the experience is going to cloud a lot of the
Wow,
critical
yeah.
thinking, is going to cloud a lot
Yeah.
of all the discernment that was there before, all the capacity to whatever might have been to process information, or the knowing that I know myself and I trust myself and I'm gonna walk into this experience knowing that it's just an experience. Even the strongest of characters and even the strongest of, yeah, beings I met, they are still struggling with this like blurred moment in which they're having this experience. And like it's basically why people, you know, go to drugs again and again and again, or like to sexual experiences. You know what, why some people, they crave that sexual experience, they crave that intensity, they crave that like blissful whatever experience that they're having. um and it's such a level of discernment and such a level of self knowing that needs to be very well established in somebody's system and being before walking into the spaces. Because I can tell now, and I don't know when I'm going to change this experience, that subtle veil, or that subtle layer, it will be like blown right open straight away as soon as the energy of the space and the plant is going to kick in. Forget about the sermon, forget about all the other things. So yeah, I guess that I would say foundation is very important, like
Yeah, 100 agree with you.
shadow work, meditation, and like none of this like spiritual fluff, this
Yes.
tarot, astrological, whatever. Like, yes, yeah, like astrology is one of the things that, again, if it's used as a support, it's all good.
Yes,
Not used
foundation.
as support is a programming matrix, is a programming
Mhm.
machine like everything else. So yes, somebody can start to explore for astrology, having a reading, like a little bit of human design, a little bit of a gene keys, but and I think that is the safest way to learn discernment, to engage with these systems. And then the moment when somebody starts to identify, oh, I'm a generator, oh, I'm a whatever, that is the moment when you have to stop
Yes.
and
Yes.
acknowledge that you took on a program.
Program. Oh, no, she didn't.
It is, and I have been there, and I know how it feels, you know, and like this, oh, I'm coming from this star system, I'm coming from
Mhm.
Orion or Sirius B or whatever,
Mhm.
because there is this need to belong, like go back.
Mm.
Yeah, what do we need? We need to be seen, we need to be
Mm.
heard, we need to be
Mhm.
loved, we need to belong, to have community, to be interdependent, to be in connection.
Mhm.
That's what are we, these are our basic needs. And have spiritual discernment, spiritual awareness, yeah, energetic hygiene, and all these kind of things. So that's what are we looking for? And every single
Mm.
time we attach to that I might be from this star system, then ask, what is my need? How is this playing onto my need to belong or my need to be important or to have like an important
Mm.
mission and be an amazing healer on the planet?
Mhm.
Like, what is my need?
Yeah, and also you could twist and say, how is it serving my higher self, you know?
Yes, exactly. Like, where is this playing into my martyrdom or my
Yeah,
sainthood
yeah.
or whatever it might be? That's like the first layer. And when all these questions are being addressed, then the original like integrated embodiment is being evoked naturally. Because if I take all of these distractions or programs out of the way, then what is left is, who am I, like, and I am this, I am, and I'm walking through this planet as being the embodiment of my authenticity,
Mm.
of my truth, of my own harmony within.
Mm.
So I don't have to worry that, oh, I might be a savior, or I might be a codependent, or I might be whatever, whatever, because I already made sure that these things, I keep them in check.
Yeah.
After my fully dressed, like, it's going to take, we don't know how long. It could take 2 years, it could take
Mm.
20 years. It doesn't even matter. But the important thing is to question,
Yeah.
them in check and say, oh, what is this being played out?
Yeah. Yeah, I was just gonna say, it's also like the programming is the illusion, and it stops us from seeing clearly and from seeing ourselves clearly.
Yeah.
So, and it's like we need to work through that veil, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So fascinating.
Yeah, so these are the subtleties.
But I like what well, how you answered the question at the beginning. It was very clear. You know,
Mm,
how does it become detrimental? When,
mm.
in what place will it? And I don't know, what you said was just so easy to understand. It
It's
wasn't like
good.
scientific, you know what I mean? It was just like,
It's
well,
good it's a good recording.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, great. Thank you for sharing. Feel like, I mean, yeah, I feel like you obviously went on a whole journey afterwards, after you decided, to step away. And also, I know that for you, it was a very clear, direct
Mm.
message. It was like, draw the line here, you know?
Yeah, because it took me a few months. I remember when it started, I started to question, like, why are these people coming back, and like, why I don't see. I could see, and I want whoever is listening to this not to assume or understand that I find that I'm like completely different or like I'm special, whatever. But like, I feel this is one of the key components of like my experience compared to other experiences. I felt that the plant medicines, because it was not just ayahuasca, I was taking some
Yes.
like loads like other ones. So what they were showing me was like, what my experience was, that I have that innate intelligence, and in this spaces I was having more space for me to unravel myself, in a space that was held, that I was supported, and that it was like this allowance of like my expression to come, and it was a space in which I could cry if I wanted to cry, if I wanted to scream, I could scream. So it was this like freedom of expression. So I was welcomed in that space. And when that happened, of course, different parts of my being started to unravel and to reveal. But my experience the whole time was a constant unraveling of this aspects of me, seeing also my shadows and seeing my shortcomings and seeing um, whatever other things they should have been addressed. And also I was experiencing more of my self-expression and more of like my ability to speak and use my voice and like speak my true, and also my ability to love deeper, like love without necessarily being afraid that I might be hurt or whatever. So of course these were happening at the same time. And for me, it was clear that, okay, so I see what's going on here. These experiences are definitely showing me the things that I should address, and these things that I'm not willing to address or I'm ashamed of or hiding from are actually the ones that are hindering my organic, authentic expression to come online. So I understand now that I have to tackle all of these things, but this is not happening in this space. The
Mm.
space was just the catalyzer, was just like boom, like throwing it out in my face, catalyzing this awareness.
Mm.
But everything else was had to be taken outside.
Mhm.
But because I was still caught up into the seduction of it, because
It's seductive, 100,
yeah,
yeah, that's
it
the
is
word.
very, very seductive
Yes.
experience. And there was this seduction of like the music and the lights and the magic. And, even if I was not seeing like visuals or other things, but everything was heightened. So the light, the way it was dancing and moving and like that higher sensory experience was hooking me and making me want to stay and just make sure that I'm correct. And in this whole time, I was still questioning the same things, but at the same time, I started to question everything else. Why these people are coming back?
Mm.
Why are these things invoked? Why people are being very tired after the experiences, like depleted. And I understood more aspects, the fact that I was taking the right amount of minerals, that I was preparing for the ceremonies, and I was having the integration time as like in a physical way appropriate, and nobody was actually taught how to do that. And when the magnesium got depleted, people started to get cramps. They were like achy. Some of them, they started to have these experiences as being possessed. They will spiral into depression afterwards. The dopamine receptors were being inhibited, and like certain chemicals were not being released in the body and stuff like that. And it was racking havoc on other people, but that was not happening for me. And now, after a while of constantly looking into it, I gathered all the pieces and the data, and this is what made it different for me, that I was uncovering what I need to look at. And I understood that those things that I'm afraid of or ashamed of, or I'm still like having a specific perspective on, they're hindering my authentic expression, but this needs to be taken out. And then I've seen all the other things, like the lack of minerals, the lack of proper integration, the lack of working with the parts and the nervous system, plus all the other energetic, unseen aspects, which are an episode in itself, and probably like the other beings much more savvy, talking about like what are actually the energetic dangers in these spaces. So it took me, I guess, 6 months, about 6 months, to keep asking these questions in that space and keep observing. Like at some point, I wasn't even having experiences of my like myself to myself. I was just like a Sherlock Holmes, what is this and what is that, and what is this happening, and kind of
Yeah.
like seeing the threads, the common points from people's experiences before the journey, during the journey, the common denominators and stuff like that. And that's how I gather, through observation. Like observation is a very good um, source of
Yes.
learning. And sometimes I get pissed off with Ricky because he's always saying like observation. We don't have to have the experience all the time. We can only use the observation, which I disagree. But at the same time, I do agree that observation is a very, very useful
Yeah.
and important tool for
Yeah.
us, and not to bump the head
Yeah.
always. Sometimes we
Yeah,
have to
yeah.
bump the head.
I mean, it's interesting. I feel like sometimes with observation, it works in a way where you see it, and because you've seen it almost so viscerally, if it's almost like it was your experience. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. And also when we observe something, that reality changes.
Yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Quantum
It
mechanics.
is happening in the things that I'm learning now about the subconscious
Yeah.
mind, like the blocks, the energetic blocks and the emotional blocks that we have in our subconscious mind and our brain, are basically going to come out in our reality as coping mechanisms, as what we call a reality, or they're going to create a disease.
Yes.
But in recall healing and new German medicine, if we can trace that part of like our personal history, maybe family line, maybe lifeline, certain events or certain emotions or certain traumatic experiences that happen, and we talk about it and we bring it into awareness, and that thing is not running at the back of our minds, quote unquote, and is actually coming to the forefront of our awareness, that is helping our brain and our subconscious mind resolve that specific situation.
Mhm.
Therefore, the disease is not going to appear in the
Yeah,
body.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's powerful work we're doing here, you know? Yeah.
It is. It is.
Yeah, it's amazing. So,
And
yeah, I mean so
or with this, I would like to say that maybe 3 years ago, if you would ask me, is it true that one night of ayahuasca, for example, is 10 years of psychotherapy? I would have said
yes.
yes.
And now?
And now I would say
Maybe, you know?
it is, no, it is the illusion. It is the illusion of 10 years of psychotherapy,
Yeah.
because
Wow.
occasionally the process in that space
Yeah.
could make the subconscious bring something to the forefront, and that could be resolved. For example, the lady with the cancer, if she had like an
Yeah.
emotional blockage, and then in that spiritual
Yeah.
experience that came to her awareness, and she started to make sense of it, and maybe they had a sharing
Mm.
circle and she verbalized it, then that conflict was resolved and she walked out without cancer. That is very possible. But then that is very isolated, very rare instance that most likely is not going to happen in most ceremonies for most people. That's why people can coming back and back and back, and not too much change is happening. And actually the consciousness and like a good session of self-reflection or journaling or mirror work or even somatic therapy, talk therapy, like all these aspects in one session can unravel the
Mhm.
same thing without
Yeah.
having put like these substances into somebody's body that's completely depleting the system of minerals, and also being in a space that energetically it's like it's a soup, and most time is not a great soup. And yeah, like these things can be unraveled in a way that is sustainable, and that is
Yes.
jarring. It's not jarring for the psyche, and it's not jarring for the consciousness.
Yeah.
So I would say yes, occasionally one, night with any plant medicine could be the equivalent, but if there's no foundation, if there is like no persistent good quality follow-up and tools in the toolbox,
Mm.
that is going to be lost,
Yeah.
quantum field, very quickly.
Yeah. I mean, it feels like, and it sounds like, and from my observation, it feels like, yeah, you went into the world and it was just kind of like this playful thing, and but feels like it was after that
Mm.
period of time, after exploring the medicines, that you really got into the nitty
Yeah.
gritty process of this deep self, developing your awareness
Hmm.
and the inner work, you know?
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. Amazing. Thank you so much. I feel like this was very wholesome, very full, very full. Yes, tackled lots of different angles. Really, really cool.
Yeah. Trust will help people to pull the thread and piece
Mm,
the pieces together, and of course take like have their own choices, but have the choice with more awareness, and within that experience the experience can actually change, and it could, like,
Mm,
certain things could be revealed in a way that is safer and is like more integrated
mm,
and
mm.
for the system to process.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's just I just think it's so important, like you say, to ask these questions, to bring in more awareness, even if we don't have it, to call it in, like
Yeah.
by asking the questions, like, what are we doing here? Why? What's actually happening? And I just feel like it's just something that's not really spoken about in these ways in the circles. It's all just a bit like a soup. Exactly.
And it's
Just go
like
in.
it's this thing of like, oh, we're being protected just because we invoked some beings, where therefore we're being protected, or love heals it all, or like, yes, it's a very beautiful perspective, but it's also very naive to think that. And it's very naive to take this stance of like lack of responsibility and accountability. We have to be responsible and we have to be accountable, and that's actually where spiritual maturity comes in.
Yes.
Gotta look at the thing as some level of like some form of play, but it has to be a wise playfulness, not like a child, like there's
Yes.
childish kind
Yes.
of behavior, and it's also is the childlike. So the childlike is the wise integrated child that kind of like plays but also has the awareness,
Mm.
where childish is like everything is love and light and like let's play, and kind of like get into this things just because there is this lack of awareness, and is this very deep, we're taken on board, and a lot of people are taken on board things they hear just because so and so said so
Yes, true.
on the internet, for example. And of course I'm talking from my personal experience, but I'm pretty sure like a lot of other people had this experience.
Yeah, because that person's credible or whatever.
Yeah, we kind of like, and just because somebody was in the healing arts for like 20 years, or was
Yes.
for 20 years, knows better than I do, or just
Mm.
because, this person had amazing results working with Metatron, whatever, it's all like implicitly I have to trust this healer. It's not about that. And then again, like if we're like constantly really back in like, am I giving my power away? Like, am I thinking like, like, and of course,
Yeah.
it's
Reel it back in. I love that.
it's a very good thing to ask for support. Of course,
Yes.
very good. Like, there's a level of spiritual maturity in that, to
That's
ask
true.
for support. Like, hey, I don't know how to process this. I feel like I have this stuckness here, and I don't know how to I don't know how to, you know, um, release it or let it go, whatever. And then we go and ask for support. But at the same time, that's where the nuance come in and discernment come in. This situation of asking for support is very much different, to do it from a level of discernment and questioning and awareness,
Yes.
other than just like reading all the tarot books and listening to Bashar and whatever channelers are out there in the world. They kind of like have this fancy language, and they kind of like show you the secrets of the universe and how to manifest out of the thin air. So I guess there's a lot in the spiritual, in the medicine circles, that kind of vibe as well. Like, just because these people are doing this, and just because they are very loving and very welcoming, therefore is the perfect space for me to heal or evolve or whatever. And actually it's not. Yeah, it is not. So it comes back to us to be accountable, responsible, to have a level
Mm.
of spiritual maturity, and explore these things, but explore these things with awareness, explore
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
the slowest pace possible, to
Mm.
allow, like the fruits of our questioning to also come to
Mm.
fruition, and not just ask the question and run to the next quick fix.
Mhm. Yeah, wow. I think it's just amazing to I'm very grateful to be able to have you on here and speak to you because I feel like, you've done a lot of that work of the integration, and you've we peel back layers to see clearer, to see deeper, so that you can bring in all these other aspects of what's happening that some other people might not necessarily be aware of, you know? And yeah, this is it. This is why it's so important to have these spaces to just
Mhm.
speak, to share, you know?
Thank you for your inspiration to create this podcast, because
Mm.
there's a massive explosion of
Mm.
the medicine the medicine world, the plant medicine stuff, and it's kind of like infiltrating the Western world as well.
Yeah.
Infiltrating, like now it's happening in big retreat centers in big cities of the world, which again, yeah, like I still have to see how this is going to unfold and unravel in the next couple of years, but is there's a lot of spiritual ego in those circles. There's a lot
Oh,
of
yeah.
this entitlement of like
Yeah.
I've done this thing and now I'm a shaman, and
Yes.
oh, I've done this thing, I had this experience, and now I'm being called to work with the plant medicine.
Mhm.
Because that's why I said earlier,
Mhm.
like the subtlety is almost
Mm.
not it can't be actually taken into consideration, because when somebody steps into that space, like everything is going to be
Mhm.
blown wide open, and like
Yeah.
discernment goes out of the window, and all these kind of things, and again, everything that's coming mainstream has to be questioned. Everything that's
Yes.
mainstream, from food to diets to supplements to anything,
Yeah,
everything
100%.
that grows very quickly and takes like this, exponential proportions,
Mm.
it has to be questioned. And the plant medicine work and journeys is one of them. And the question is,
Mhm. Ooh, I love that. That's a good way to end it on.
why?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I totally am behind you with that. If one thing that I've learned these past few years since 2020 is that, yeah, anything that's mainstream is to be questioned, but
Sure.
anything is to be questioned anyway, so
Question everything, my friend.
yeah. I love that. Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's true what you're saying. There is an explosion, and it's like, okay, hang on, what's happening here? Let's go
Why?
peer a little bit deeper.
Why? Overnight in the next,
Yeah.
that last 10 years, like this is like going off the roof.
Mhm.
Mm,
Mhm.
it wasn't hidden to humanity before.
Yeah.
It's known since very ancient times, but like why we're
Mm.
having
Mm.
climate changes and whatever other things, and carbon footprint and plant
Yes.
ceremonies everywhere, when they're actually very simple tools that don't require any
Mm.
risks,
Yeah, and
breath, movement,
yeah,
regulating the nervous
yeah.
system, yeah, learning about
Yeah.
our parts, working with our parts, and
Mm.
bringing them all into wholeness through our own
Mhm.
being. We're using our own
Mhm.
consciousness. It's very simple. There's nothing outside ourselves.
It is very simple, and I think that's the it's the biggest, like, irony of it all.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the spiritual community, this is one thing when I first met you, I just remember thinking, but why are there so many different things? It's like you can get lost in it. And I see the same thing. I see people chasing one different technique after the other
Mhm.
constantly.
Mhm.
And it's just a bit like, what?
Mhm.
But I think, yeah, ultimately, truth is simple.
Yeah. It's simple. Yeah.
Yeah. But it also doesn't mean that it's
It's
gonna be
complex.
easy.
It's not
Yeah, yeah.
it's simple, but it's complex. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's not easy. Yeah, it's simple, but it's not easy. But
Yeah.
that's the beauty. And like whoever wants
Mhm.
to have like funky spiritual experiences, it's enough to be in this reality and question this reality and question why we do what we do, why we behave the way we behave, and
Yeah, that's
look at
true.
the complexity and like the
Yeah.
the whole thing of everything.
Mhm.
that is very entertaining in itself.
Yeah.
And we can create art with that.
Wow. Yeah, that's what we're doing. That's life. This is it. Love that. Amazing. Thank you so much.
You're
Yeah,
welcome. Thank
really.
you for having me.
It's funny because I think we've spoken about it on voice notes in little bits, but this has been amazing, like to
Mhm.
really just sit down and just share, you know?
Let it
Yeah,
flow, let it come, and
exactly. And also from now, a further point than the immediate as well.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's definitely it's a difference. I feel like I'm in a different space, and of course, the perspectives change, and some
Yep.
perspectives are reinforced than other.
Mm-hmm.
But what I love is about the nuances. You know, like the more
That's so true.
time goes, and like the more I travel, it gets more and more nuanced, and
Yeah.
it falls on a spectrum, and like that is, I guess, like the where the spiritual maturity comes in, and this refinement that keeps unfolding, and
Mm-hmm.
it's perpetual. Like I don't really feel there's an end to it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
At least now it became enjoyable, so it can be
Yeah.
that before it was not, but now I'm like, oh, actually I like this, I like to, you know, travel on
Mm-hmm.
this avenues.
Amazing. Sweet. I think, yeah, you've covered so much.
Mm.
Don't- But yeah, do you feel like there's any final words you'd like to share or
No, I feel that mm, yeah, there's so much, but I guess there's so much beauty and value in going back to the recording, for whoever's listening to go back, because there's always this part of our consciousness that maybe is resisting to something, or maybe is distracted by other thing that happened, and then suddenly in the future is going to land differently, because throughout the entire recording we stressed the questioning, we emphasized going back to our own power and connecting to our own intelligence, and knowing that we are source, but like all these nuances are not going to come and um, be recognized by somebody maybe the first time they hear this. So I would say, listen to this and give it some time, and maybe go back on it and see what other things your consciousness was not willing or able to register at that point in time, and now is going to land in a different way.
mm-hmm. Amazing. mm. Works like that. Thank you. Thank you so much. So much love to you.
Thank you, Jess.
Yeah.
Thank you, and thank you for doing this.
Yes, thank you. Received. Thank you so much for listening to this episode and to this podcast. We hope that you can gain many insights through the art of listening. If you haven't already, we would love it if you can follow us on YouTube, on Instagram, and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts if that feels right for you. We've also just launched our first online course, Awakening 101, a ninja's guide to navigating a spiritual awakening, which is led by me and is offered via donation. So if you feel called to that, then please dive in. It's available via our website. Thank you.